I'm sure you've all learned by now that politics and religion are generally forbidden topics for conversation, at least here in the West. It's a damn shame since those are some of the most interesting things to talk about. You can only talk about the game and what projects are going on in someone's backyard for so long. And the shunning of these topics has led to media doing the same. We don't often get movies that explicitly dive into religious or political differences. They might make allusions here and there, but most movies try to play it safe to avoid potentially offending the audience. That isn't true for Heretic, which is very open about discussing religion. The movie dabbles in both sides, and no matter where you are on the religious spectrum, it will try to challenge your perspective. Overall, I really enjoyed Heretic, and I think it's one of the most original movies we've had this year. The premise is super intriguing, and the movie does a great job of gradually escalating the scenario. I will say that I love the trailer for this movie because it gives you just enough information to get you invested without giving anything away. Everything you see in the trailer is from the first 40 minutes or so of the movie, and so a lot will happen that you don't expect. I will avoid spoilers for now and give you my general rundown of Heretic and whether I think you should watch it, then I'll get into spoilers and I'll make a note of when that happens. So too long didn't watch, should you see Heretic? In my opinion, yes. The main thing I love about this movie is the originality. Heretic doesn't feel like anything else, and that is an accomplishment in and of itself. The movie is original, and if you know me, I tend to give a lot of leeway to original movies. Now let's get into some more specifics. Heretic is a tight movie that focuses on just 3 characters, and the actors do a phenomenal job. Hugh Grant is creepy yet intellectual, and his character almost feels like a toned-down, theological variant of Hannibal Lecter. Sophie Thatcher does a phenomenal job of trying to remain composed and sharp, but at the same time internally panicking. And Chloe East does a great job of playing the ditzy blonde. More on that later. Sophie Thatcher in particular was a familiar face since I saw her in Boogeyman, and I'm happy that she seems to be advancing in her career since she is a great actress. And I'm going to make a bold claim that I think she's going to be the next Anya Taylor-Joy. Just give it 4 years and we'll see if this ages like milk. Another thing I love is the escalation and suspense. This movie might feel a bit slow for the first act, but if you're a sucker for theology like me, then you'll find it enjoyable even though it's very dialogue heavy. The movie also takes some turns that I didn't expect in the slightest, especially in the second act. And this is where I started to think to myself, holy shit, this movie is one of the creepiest things I've seen this year. And that's saying a lot since we've had some bangers for the horror genre. The movie is also bold in a lot of its writing choices, and it doesn't shy away from making a crazy turn and then embracing the new directions that it's taking. There is also a lot of suspense around Mr. Reed. Is he a good guy? A bad guy? Is this a death trap? Or just some weird social experiment? Hugh Grant does a perfect job of teetering the line between those two so we don't get an accurate read on what his intentions are. Of course, by the end we figure it out, but for the first act of the movie, whether he is well-meaning or manipulative is perfectly concealed. The choice of the title Heretic is also perfect since heretic comes from the Greek word heretikos, which means able to choose. This is a perfect title since in the movie we see that the girls are tasked with choosing a door, and this word perfectly relates to the religious themes of the movie, where Reed is trying to get the girls to choose belief or disbelief for themselves. I also love the craftsmanship of this movie, and it's gorgeous to look at, and another amazing thing is that this film doesn't use any AI. The directors are very outspoken against AI, and their decision to not use any of it in Heretic is something that I can really appreciate, since this movie doesn't cut any corners. So those are my general spoiler-free thoughts on Heretic. The movie is ambitious and bold, and it's definitely worth a watch. But now let's get to the spicy stuff. Spoilers ahead. Heretic is a good movie, but some of the writing choices are incredibly far-fetched. Almost all of my issues happen in the third act. Reed kills Sister Barnes after realizing that she's not gonna fall for his manipulation, and then he tries to coax the much more naive Paxton into his scheme. I don't really have issues with Barnes dying, even if she is the more interesting character, because I can appreciate the boldness and unpredictability of the script. The issue is, Paxton goes from a dumb blonde to a genius in a matter of seconds. She deduces that the prophet saying it's not real was her breaking character, and she also figures out that the simulation bit and miracle from Reed are just a load of crap. This is a far cry from who she was 10 minutes ago, where she seemed to be quite naive and gullible. I'm also confused why the prophet chose to stay on script for everything else, but then break on her final sentence to try to convey that the whole thing is fake, and that there is no miracle. Like, if you're gonna go off script, then you would go off script for the whole thing, and just say this is an act, he's playing you, he killed the first lady, and I'm just an actress. Something along those lines. But I understand the movie wants the miracle to seem legit, and they want to weave in a double entendre to make their point about religion and fake miracles and have their suspense, so I get it. I won't go too hard here, since I try to have fun at parties and not ruin the spirit of the movie. Going back to Paxton becoming Einstein, it's weird because she also mentions that she saw how wet Reed's hair was when he came back from his little excursion to meet them in the living room. But this wetness on his hair wasn't showcased at all. And this seems to be a continuity error as far as I can tell. And Paxton notices this, but then remains perfectly calm while acting dumb. It's just a bit too much for me to believe. The issue is, the problems only get worse, since Reed gets stabbed in the neck and then somehow fully sprints upstairs and beats a healthy Sister Paxton there. Barnes, who was dead for an hour, comes back to life, saves Paxton, and then dies again. The movie gets really far-fetched while trying to present this isn't a miracle or just luck kind of thing, and I think the final act is where most people will have their problems. I'm also confused as to how Reed's clumsy ass just left that religious blade object out in the middle of the room. Originally, I thought one of the prophets left it there to try to help the girls, but we find out that they are chained and about 30 feet underground, so Reed just forgot to move it, and this is a guy who's apparently super meticulous. He's trapped other people for years, and this is all a part of his master plan, but somehow he just forgets this big-ass blade in the middle of the room. That part just feels like plot convenience. Going to the religious side, I don't have an issue here, since for the average moviegoer, this area is fine, and it doesn't get any deeper than it needs to. I enjoyed this movie, but if you are into apologetics or theology, then a lot of these points made by Reed are pretty easy to refute. But we get some young, impressionable missionaries, so it's understandable that they won't be able to stand their base.
Stand your base! Stand your base, the space is your space, yeah?
I was surprised though that Barnes solidly rebuked Reed's tirade about iterations, and she was much more knowledgeable than the average missionary. It's clear the writers did this because they are interested in religion, and Barnes is a conduit for their thoughts. And just to make it clear, these are not critiques but just observations. The last thing I will say is that the meaning of the film seems to be grounded in the true religion being control, but every religious person who's read a little bit knows this. We are all slaves to something, and religion gives us the avenue to choose to be slaves to something rather than to be involuntary servants to something else. We can be slaves to God, or we can be slaves to vices like greed, lust, pride, etc. All of this is to say that Reed can suck it and go back to r/atheism. Okay, jokes aside, I really liked Heretic, and I think it's a breath of fresh air in an oversaturated genre. I would love to see more movies dealing with religion, since it's such a foundational aspect of life for so many people. This movie has suspense, it's genuinely unsettling, and it feels unique. While the writing isn't perfect, it's brave without overly insulting your intelligence. This movie is fun, and for most people it will be thought-provoking, so go check it out while you can. Heretic is a good movie, and I hope we see more experimental type of films like this in the future.